My name is Chris Campbell. I'm a practicing CPA and I work with small businesses and individuals to help them pay the least amount of taxes possible while keeping them out of jail. So today I wanted to talk about PPP relief. I got a disturbing phone call recently from a potential new client, business owner. And back in 2020 or so, when PPP was on fire, they obtained the PPP loan, but they got it through one of these promoters. And we're finding out they're pretty scammy. Promoters would come along, sign up all these businesses for PPP, go and obtain the PPP loans for them. And in return for obtaining them, they would take a percentage of the loan obtained. So as a result, that pushed promoters to inflate loan amounts because the higher the loan amount was, the higher the payout was for the promoter. And it left the door open for a lot of embellishing, a lot of scams, a lot of falsifying records, all in an attempt to obtain the highest loan amount possible so that they can get paid the most amount possible. So with this potential client, they realized that they had obtained an amount for PPP that they should not have received. Appears their amount was inflated a bit from these promoters. And the problem they're facing now is we're in the forgiveness period where if you wanted the loan to be completely forgiven, there's paperwork that you need to file to document that you indeed used the funds what they were for. And in this particular instance, created even a bigger problem because the loan was over 150K. I had mentioned in a previous video that if your loan was under 150K, they don't really do that much due diligence as far as forgiveness. They essentially just take your word for it when you make a claim that you used the funds what they were supposed to be used for. The issue comes in for those that got loans over the 150K. You have to provide a bit more documentation. And where this particular client ran into trouble because the loan was inflated to begin with, they don't have the proper documentation to show that the funds were used the way they were supposed to be used and in turn get forgiven. So this particular client had the loan. They expected the loan to be forgiven and spent the money, and now they're on the hook for the full amount because they can't get anything forgiven. It seems as though it was unknowingly. They weren't really educated from these promoters. They falsified some records to obtain the loan, and they didn't provide much guidance, at least prior to taking the loan, as far as the steps to get the loan forgiven. So it appears this all happened unknowingly to the client. They thought they were in compliance. They did a good job of keeping their records, but nonetheless, they had expenditures that didn't qualify. I thought about this and I was like, I wonder how many other people might be in a similar position where these promoters, came along and PPP fraud was rampant. There were a number of promoters out there, tax promoters, where they went and approached these businesses and say, hey, look, we can get you the PPP and loan. Business owners saw everyone else was doing it. They were doing it, but just unaware of what was going on. And I guess they figured everything was legit. So I wonder how many people are in this position. It has to be quite a lot. And I guess the issues now come up because the loans. So 2020, 2021, I guess even part into 22, this really wasn't an issue because folks were still in the loan period before repayment begins. So folks got the forgiveness and it was all good during those prior years. Loans weren't due yet. Now here we are, as I record this at the end of 23, going into 24. If you didn't get those loans forgiven, now it's time to start paying. And there's probably a lot of people in that position where they were misguided, didn't get the proper forgiveness, and now they're on the hook to pay. Still, to this day, they're still going after folks for PPP fraud and still locking folks up. It can be quite worrisome. You think you're doing the right thing, then you realize that you might have a fraudulent PPP loan on your hand. So if you think you have a fraudulent PPP loan, unbeknownst to you at the time, but you find out later that you might have, you need to seek legal counsel immediately. And by no means, I'm not an attorney, so don't view this as legal advice, but you need to seek legal counsel. You have two fronts that you can deal with here. So One is you have to deal with raising your hand, so to speak, with the government and let them know that you submitted this PPP loan. It might be fraudulent, but you didn't know it was fraudulent. You can work with counsel to have something worked out and rectify that. I would imagine that you'll be in a lot better shape if you raise your hand and let them know versus the government coming and knocking on your door asking for proofs, because they're still looking. I think they signed that law last year where they increased the statute of limitations to up to 10 years. So they're looking, and they're going to continue to lock people up. From a legal standpoint, you're probably in better shape if you raise your hand and draw attention to it on your own versus hoping and praying that you don't get caught. So that's one end. The other end you can take a look at is from the fraudulent promoter. If a fraudulent claim was filed on your behalf, I would imagine there's recourse you could take against the promoter who will obtain the loan for you, because I'm sure they created all the documents, created all the paperwork. I'm sure you just signed them, but I'm sure that they had a hand in obtaining what they needed from you. I would imagine there's some sort of legal recourse you could take against the promoter, and also alerting the government to this particular promoter. So those are the two fronts that you'll have to take with legal counsel. Another thing you have to consider is that, just like with the IRS, ignorance is not an excuse to get out of it. So I think even if you do go and raise your hand and let them know that you unknowingly submitted a fraudulent claim, if the paperwork isn't right to get it forgiven, you're still going to be on the hook for it. I don't see them saying, okay, we understand, so don't worry about it. You're still going to be on the hook for it. You still got to be prepared to pay. But I think this is where legal counsel comes in. And if you have access to those promoters, you could possibly sue to get the damages from that promoter from filing those false claims. I think that might be the way out. I would imagine, though, that you probably will have a hard time getting your hands on this promoter, because some of the stories I'm hearing is that now that the payments are due and you're trying to get in touch with the folks that got you the loan, they're nowhere to be found. So I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these companies or individuals that promoted getting PPP probably can't find. So that's going to be tough, but I think that's going to be your recourse. If you're under 150K, then I think you should be good, because there's not much you have to submit. But if you're over that 150K threshold, I would say don't try to go through the motions of getting it forgiven, because you're just going to have to perpetuate the lie. You're going to be in a sticky situation if you try to get it forgiven. Now, there are partial forgiveness, not all or nothing. It could be possible that you qualify for partial forgiveness, which I think was the case of this particular client that reached out. It wasn't that they were not entitled to the PPP. They were entitled to something. It's just that they were not entitled to the amount they received. So you can work on a partial forgiveness, but I would say before you go that route, seek legal counsel to make sure you do it the right way. And then with the advice of legal counsel, see if you can get part of it forgiven. Anything beyond that, see if you can seek recourse from those promoters that possibly ran the scam. So that's my tidbit of advice. I hope this helps. If you have any more questions about this topic or any other tax, accounting related questions, feel free to reach out. Happy to help. That's all for now, and I'll see you in the next one.